Right, welcome everyone. It is Tuesday, March 22nd, 2023, and we are here at the Athens-Clarke County City Hall with myself, Mayor Kelly Gertz, and the County Commission for two purposes tonight. We'll have a brief special called session, and then we'll follow that with our regularly scheduled agenda setting session. And so to begin the special called session, I'll ask Sarah acting as clerk to call the roll for us.
Davenport.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Fisher.
Here.
Kuehl.
Here.
Culpepper.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, initially we had two items on tonight's agenda. We actually need to remove the first item, given that there's some due diligence that still has to be pursued.
Move
And
to
so,
amend the agenda, removing item 1.
Second.
all right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Hool to remove item 1 from the agenda, second from Commissioner Thornton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, hearing none, the agenda is amended. As I will do going forward every evening, just will note that the commission has adopted a civility pledge, and we have been supported by the Georgia Municipal Association in this. And so the pledge notes that the way we govern ourselves is often as important as the decisions we make. Our collective decisions will be better when differing views have had the opportunity to be fully vetted and considered. All people have the right to be treated with respect, courtesy, and openness. We value all input. We commit ourselves to conduct ourselves at all times with civility and courtesy to each other, and that includes everyone in the room. Given that we do have one item of new business, I need a motion for suspension of rules.
So moved.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Myers for suspension of rules. Got a second from Commissioner Fisher for suspension of rules. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We've got a public input opportunity on the single item on our special called session, which is just the temporary moratorium on our downtown Parklet program. Would anyone like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, I'll come behind the rail. Is there a motion anyone would like to make?
So moved.
Second.
To accept the temporary moratorium on the downtown Parklet program.
All right, motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Hamby. All right, Commissioner Wright, any follow-up comments?
I just appreciate staff's getting this on our voting agenda so that we can review our Parklet program and understand the parameters of safety for everybody that's using them or not using them.
Commissioner Hamby?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, and just for the purpose of everybody in the room and everybody in the public, this item will be going back to committee for some amendment, just so we can make sure that the Parklet program downtown aligns with our special events needs generally. So, please do, thank you.
An ordinance of the Commission of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, to establish a moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for parklets and to provide other lawful purposes. I would just point out to the Commission that this moratorium runs until Unified Government adopts a revision of the Code of Ordinances related to Parklet program, or until Tuesday, September 19, 2023, whichever occurs first. So basically, 6 months is what we've got there. I don't make sure everybody understood that.
Thank you.
May not need that much time.
Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, so this moratorium is on applications for parklets at all, not just for construction within those parklets, is that correct?
Yes, because, it's unclear what some of those characteristics are, so that in order to be fair and make sure that we've reviewed everything comprehensively, then it would be on all parklets.
And it's important to understand this moratorium won't have any effect upon those parklets that the Unified Government's already authorized to proceed with construction. So it's not like they're going, this moratorium won't require them to take up the platforms at this point that have already been built. But the ordinance itself was clear that you only get the right to have that for the period of time that your permit is issued for, either for an annual basis or a quarterly basis. So there's never any vested right to a long-term promise of that. But these businesses that have been granted, that have begun construction already, will be able to use, maybe y'all may determine it's okay forever, or if it was changed, they'd be able to have those until that permit expired, if it makes sense.
And so there's no way to have the moratorium just on construction of structures like this and still allow parklets to happen without?
We could look, I could look to change the language.
I'm just thinking about how if this does take the full 6 months, the entire summer is spent without us potentially having parklets as we've intended, because we're trying to safeguard against this particular phenomenon.
It's probably fair to realize that we've only had 4 entities interested in any version of a parklet, and so it's been a relatively small group of all the opportune downtown businesses, who would have both a food and beverage license and parking in front of them. So many, many dozens of potential businesses could have availed themselves of the parklet ordinance, and only 4 have.
Good point so far.
Commissioner Myers?
And there are none that are in the process. Perhaps you touched this. There's none in the evaluation stage.
There's one that we think is proceeding to permit, but that permit's not been granted as of the vote tonight.
But it's been submitted?
No.
I
It's
could give you an update. This is from Gavin Hassemer, who's over this program. He's the interim director of Central Services. He indicates that they have 1 completed parklet with a permit issued, Ty Spoon, that will be allowed to operate as normal, and also they have 3 completed applications where the entities have been allowed to proceed with construction, National Trapeze, and South Kitchen and Bar. And an incomplete application submitted by 1 business that has been informed of deficiencies but will not have completed their review process before this evening. So that entity would not be able to go forward.
We suspect that business was about to construct such a deck, and knowing the commission had questions about it, we did not want them to go through the time and expense of that, if that was not going to be the ultimate
I would say,
decision.
Commissioner, if you decide you want to look at amending this to try, I don't think I can do it on the fly, because one of the problems with that ordinance is there's not any detail about it. There was a lot of thought into this. I know we talked about it forever, about legal put in and risk, but it's just when you're doing new programs and new things, it's hard to think of everything, So if that's something you want to do, I think it's something we ought to adopt it as is tonight, and let me go back and sit and think. Because even this took a good bit of thought. I don't know if I can come up with something on the fly that might mess up, if that makes sense.
Which is why it's going to GOC, right? You said it's going to GOC.
That's right.
Well,
You follow what I'm saying?
I'm happy to support this today, but just knowing how things can take time, and, recognizing we're about to enter the warm season, if it does look like this is going to take some time, I'd hope that maybe we can revise the moratorium to specifically prohibit construction of these sorts of things, but still allow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'd like, how I'd prefer we approach
Yeah.
it. Come back. That way I can think about it and draft the appropriate, rather than sitting here trying to fill in language.
Any additional questions or observations? All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Hamby. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, do I hear a motion for adjournment of the special called session?
So moved.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Thornton and a second from Commissioner Davenport for adjournment. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, special called session is adjourned. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our agenda setting session. We have several opportunities for public input in our agenda setting session. We'll have an opportunity on our consent agenda, and then we'll have an opportunity on old and new business that will include planning and zoning items. During public input, there's a clock in front of Sarah. It will turn green when you begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your 3 minutes of input has expired. And so I'm calling it this time to see if anybody would like to speak to any of the consent agenda items. These are 1 through 7. 1 through 7. All right, seeing none, would any commissioner like to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion?
Yes.
Which is?
Number
item-
2 and number 6.
Any others? All right, so we'll go to public input on all other items. So 2, 6, and then
So do I.
9 through 23. So now's the time for public input on all old and new business. That is 2, 6, and 8 through 23. Okay.
All right, hi everybody. I think everybody knows who I am, but if you don't, my name is Danielle. I'm the president of Athens Pride and Queer Collective. I'm here to discuss the recent decision not to award our organization CDBG funding for FY 2024. As a trans woman, Athens has been a safe haven for me to grow and thrive. Athens Pride and Queer Collective supports the queer community and generates significant economic boost to our community and its businesses. I hope ACC will reconsider the recommendation to exclude APQC from the recommended list for funding. This grant would allow us to provide gender-affirming care to trans individuals in Athens-Clarke County who currently have nowhere to receive medical care. It is disappointing to see that certain organizations that refuse to provide services with dignity and respect to trans and non-binary individuals received funding while our organization did not. It is also alarming because organizations that receive government funding are expected to provide services without discrimination to all individuals. Whew. This goes against the principles of fairness and equality that should guide the allocation of public funds. Discrimination against marginalized groups such as the queer community is not only morally wrong, but it also has a negative impact on people's mental health, physical well-being, and their ability to fully participate in society. It is essential that the government funding is used to support organizations that prioritize inclusivity, diversity, and respect for all individuals. Should the mayor and commission want to know the names of the organizations I'm talking about, I would be glad to let y'all know who they are privately. APQC is a vital organization. I am happy to also provide data collected by our organization proving the need for the services we seek to provide. Our community needs assessment garnered hundreds of responses, which far supersedes the majority of survey responses collected by our local government. APQC is a vital organization that has contributed significantly to the growth and development of Athens, and we need your support to continue providing crucial services to the community. The passing of Senate Bill 140 today, which prohibits trans youth from accessing gender-affirming care, highlights the urgent need for accessible and affordable health care for trans individuals in our community. Without funding, many of our community members will continue to struggle with mental health, addiction, and lack of support. I hope that you will show your support for the queer community by taking real action and investing in our community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Danielle. Others who'd like to speak to old or new business? Again, that's 2, 6, and 8 through 23.
Hi there, I'll get my card in just a moment. My name is Stephanie Witt. I am a resident of Clarke County. I am also the clinical director for the Athens Nurses Clinic. I'm here to speak along with Danielle on behalf of any funding that we're requesting from the local government. We have partnered with Athens Pride and Queer Collective to help try to push measures forward to help us fund gender-affirming care. Athens Nurses Clinic would be the primary provider for such care. We are a long-standing institution in this community. We have been here for more than 30 years as a nurse practitioner-led primary care source for, give me a second, our most marginalized, invisible, vulnerable, and sometimes maligned community members. But I want to come back to that word, there are community members. And so we have provided services that are not otherwise provided, especially by our state, through other means such as expanded Medicaid. And we have not only provided primary care, but also specialty care for that focuses on public health issues such as substance abuse disorder. We've been providing hepatitis C treatment, so we are well accustomed to expanding beyond primary care, and now we think we're a natural fit to go into the realm of gender-affirming care. We have solicited the expertise of those in the community with experience in this actually underserved population. And in reality, there's a glut not just for the uninsured community, but the community at large. So Jenny Wares, who's here with us tonight, is pretty much the only specializing provider in our community, although others help to kind of support this. We are a natural fit. We have been providing trauma-informed care before that was like really a big term. And so just wanted to put the face in your mind when you're thinking about the big picture of who will be delivering that care. And for all of you who don't know us yet, we love to have our commissioners. And when you see what we do and what little we do it with, I think you'd be impressed with the work we do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else like to speak to old or new business tonight?
Hello, my name is Dr. Jenny Wares. I live at 280 Cherokee Avenue here in Athens, Georgia. I've been providing transgender medicine and hormones at the University of Georgia for the last 7 years. I also work for Plume Health, which is a telehealth company providing care for transgender medicine. Because as you know, we have such a difficult time providing care for people that telehealth has become a very big way that we can do this, especially with passages of laws such as today, which is an absolute travesty and is occurring across the country. There are just so many people who cannot get the care that they need. You would think that Athens would be a community where we could do this in Georgia. You would think there would be certain cities where this could be done, but there is just an absolute dearth of this care. While there are some providers who can do this in town, there's not very many. I mean, there just really are not very many. So there are some physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs who have some training and can do it for their population. There's really very few. And when my students graduate UGA and some of them stay around, there is nowhere for them to go in this town. So part of why I do the telehealth work that I do is to be able to serve more people than just UGA student and spouses. But I can assure you that if you are impoverished in this town, there is nowhere for you to go. So it's extremely exciting that Athens Nurses Clinic is wanting to fill that gap. I was incredibly excited for them to contact me and say, can you help with this? They're reaching out to other providers who can do it, but they need your help because they need the funds in order to be able to provide this. And Athens Queer Collective is right behind them, right beside them, working on it. I'm willing to help and volunteer because this is my home, this is my community. I want to give back as much as possible. But as you know, you can't do the work without the money, right? I mean, you just can't do it in a vacuum with nothing to work with. So I do ask, please, that you reconsider for this funding because it's so desperately needed. When patients transition and become who they really are, it is the most life-changing thing I have ever seen. And I was an emergency physician for 11 years, and this is way more rewarding than any work that I did there. Where we saved lives in one way, this is saving lives in another way. So I just really urge you to really consider this. This work is so transformative and so important. And what the work that they can do with so little, as Stephanie said, it is unbelievably exciting what they can do. So I thank you for your time, and we really would love to see any help that you can give us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wares.
Good evening. It's good to be back with all of you. Hope everybody's doing well. My name is Cameron J. Harrelson, and I'm in District 2, hoping we'll have someone fill in that seat here very shortly. And I just want to say that my grandmother always told me to speak up for those less fortunate than myself, and certainly to speak up against injustice. And sometimes in speaking up against that, you're speaking for people that you love. First of all, none of you here tonight have done anything wrong, but I did want to educate you and the public listening. I'm here tonight as the immediate past president of Athens Pride and Queer Collective, an organization whose roots date back to the 90s. And the reason I point that out is because our newness as an applicant and as an organization was pointed out as reasons we were not recommended for CDBG funding. We were then told that our organization and our communities didn't fit into special populations categories, which blew my mind. I'm proud to have worked with this government on important initiatives affecting our community, the Non-Discrimination Ordinance, the creation of the Human Relations Commission, where I proudly serve, and the Rainbow Crosswalk Initiative as well. While all these policies and shows of support have certainly yielded progress in Athens-Clarke County, I was troubled by the lack of support for funding here with the CBDG grant. There are others who have spoken about their personal experiences here tonight, and we appreciate the healthcare providers as well for being here and standing with us. And I know many of you are data people, so I just wanted to focus on data because I'm one of those people too. A recent study found that receipt of gender-affirming care was associated with 60% lower odds of moderate to severe depression and 73% lower odds of suicidality. And I would count, since mental health was in the special populations category for CDBG, that we certainly would be affecting change in improving mental health outcomes by supporting trans and non-binary individuals. This means also that the study found that access to gender-affirming care was associated with mitigation of mental health disparities among trans and non-binary youths and individuals. Given this population's high rates of adverse mental health outcomes due to stigma, due to discrimination, hate, and rejection, these data also suggest that access to pharmacological interventions are associated with improved mental health outcomes. Additionally, our organization conducted the first community needs assessment of queer populations in Athens, and as Danielle pointed out, that community needs assessment surveyed 300 individuals. I think the average we hear in here sometimes is 75 to 100. 51.7% of respondents wanted our organization to do more municipal advocacy with all of you. That's why I'm here. Nearly 100 respondents specifically said they did not agree with the statement that mental health and medical health care were easily accessible to them, nor that doctors had their best interest at heart. 33% of respondents said that they had experienced a medical emergency related to their gender identity or sexual orientation. And with these numbers in mind, I hope that you'll do something well for our community, because we, are part of the greater community too. So thank you. Sorry for going over.
Other input tonight? All right, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and take up the two items that were removed from the consent agenda before I relocate temporarily to look at the two planning and zoning items. So, Commissioner Myers, you had questions about the parking management agreement with the Downtown Development Authority.
I did want to use just this opportunity to ask a question about that I've had an Athenian resident ask me about multiple times. And I know the parking lot rate structures, I believe they changed last year, is that correct?
The year before.
Right. And the question was that I've been asked multiple times on is, I believe that the previous rate structure had, the lots were not always, like if the lot was further away, that person wasn't charged, it was cheaper rate, basically. And I know this is someone who lives here in Athens and has asked me multiple times about this, because now all of the parking lots are the same rate, according to this person.
Decks are cheaper. Decks are cheaper
Decks are cheaper?
than on-street, yeah.
And I guess these were some of the parking lots. It was some of the surface lots that were further away.
So that's a different
That's a different thing? A different,
component than the hourly rates. Yeah, so people rent those by the month or annually.
okay, well, she was after that. I can follow up another time with that. I just wanted to use this opportunity before I forgot about it.
We can ask and get that rate structure. I don't know what it is for individual lots.
Yeah, the ADDA has the rate structure. I don't want to be wrong in saying what it is, but the point of the surface lots is so that downtown employees can utilize the surface lots and get a rate to.
Yeah,
But you may be talking about like on Daughtery Street or some of the far away that are the same price as you move closer into town. I know that's come up before, and the situation on that just becomes a management issue, but also becomes. Not necessarily a management issue, but also becomes as downtown grows. At some point, Daughtery, once all this redevelopment's happening, is going to be as busy as Clayton. Is that what you're getting at?
I don't really know where it was, but it is an employee downtown who used the cheaper, further out lot to save some money, and that was a significant, she's very tight on money, so I just wanted to find that out, and we can follow up on that.
I think I know what you're
So-
we can get that information for
Okay.
you. Would you want to return that to
Yeah, that can
consent
return
otherwise?
to that, and I just wanted to leave the other one off. I just wanted to, that's the one about the water pipes, can we go to the next one?
Water line upgrades.
Yeah, I just wanted to leave that off and look into that more, because that was that's a whole lot of money. And I'm not against it, but I just want to be able to leave it off, so if I choose to ask some questions about it, I can at the voting meeting.
And Manager Williams, just since we're on item 6, the FY23 water line upgrades, which is an award of contract because we've got a responsive bidder, could you just briefly describe what we do over time with our water line upgrades to the public?
Yes, and this is really speaks to life cycle, and we had that long discussion, and out of all of our departments, I think Public Utilities does it best. And so these small diameter water lines are part of their renewal over time. And we've got about 13 miles left that we haven't replaced with the program. In the last 5 years, we replaced about 5 miles. And I think this one is catching up with last year and this year together. So it's about a 2-year package in 1 year to get us to 3 miles worth.
Any other questions about water lines since that's on the table? Commissioner
I
Wright?
would just maybe Commissioner Myers could put her questions into an email, so it could be answered before the meeting. And then that way,
That's
It
a
could-
very good idea.
that'd be
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. I'll see if I can have the time to delve into this and come up with whether or not I have any questions.
Anyone else on the water lines? All right, I'm going to go ahead and relocate temporarily. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Brad Griffin for 8 and 9.
Did you say briefly? Sorry, Brad, I'm just giving Brad a hard time.
Have any good discussions?
All right, and we have 2 planning and zoning items tonight. The first one is at 1125 Newton Bridge Road, which is just past Holland Youth Sports Complex as you're heading out of town on the left. If you want to orient yourself, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brad.
All right, thank you, Mayor. 2 items tonight. Both of these are straight rezoning requests, which means neither one of them bring with them a binding plan. I mean, we're used to looking at details and plans, and if you approve it, they're going to build what you're looking at on the screen. Both of these tonight are a little different in that these are really more land use decisions in terms of allowable zoning and appropriate uses thereof, and not a specific plan. So with that, our first item is 1125 Newton Bridge Road. It is a request to rezone from employment industrial with a condition to single-family residential. It also carries with it a land use change from employment to traditional neighborhood. The proposal in concept form would be to develop a 216-unit single-family subdivision. There is a concept site plan shown. The purpose of this really is to show you what kind of a yield this RS-25 zoning on that many acres would allow with sewer, if and when sewer were to get to the property. So that is a number just really in concept at this point. You see the property right there in the center of your screen on the left. It is purple, listed as employment, going to traditional neighborhood, which is compatible with both the Vineyard subdivision to the south, along with Saxon Woods to the north, that both also have the same future land use. And then the EI zoning going to RS-25 also, from a zoning standpoint, it also is compatible with those 2 adjacent neighborhoods. This is the concept plan submitted by the applicant showing how the property could be developed. These are lots that would be of a size that sewer would be required on them, with the balance of the property being left as open space. And I know you have an item dealing with sewer on your agenda that's kind of sitting in limbo waiting for the zoning action to take place. You will take that as a separate action. The recommendation from the Planning Commission felt like it was consistent with the zoning ordinance, surrounding zoning, future land use map, zoning map, site really in its current state is unlikely to be used according to existing future land use and zoning, and it currently lacks the infrastructure to support development. Staff did note in our report to the Planning Commission that those types of improvements over time could impose cost burdens on Athens-Clarke County, just as a long-term consideration, but the residential development is appropriate for the area. This property is also immediately adjacent to the Holland Youth Sports Complex. They are showing some conceptual offerings of how the neighborhood, if and when it was developed, could be tied into the park if they're able to coordinate that tie-in. But with all of that, the future land use recommendation from the Planning Commission was approval. The zoning was approval with a condition, and that condition provided was that no more than 5% of the undeveloped land shown on the site plan shall be disturbed, excluding potential pedestrian infrastructure, such as connections to the park or sidewalks. And let me jump back just real quick, explain the condition. What was presented to the Planning Commission, although in concept form, shows all of this area around the edge adjacent to the neighborhoods being set aside as open space, and still yielding the 216 lots. If it just zoned with a straight zoning, all of the property not currently located within the easements or the environmental areas could be developed, provided you met that density, maybe on a larger lot. So that was the reason. Planning Commission's condition basically says that you can build within that envelope that you're showing for development here so as to provide the open space you're also showing, but we're going to give you an additional 5% kind of leeway in case a stormwater pond gets larger or something like that, but that 5% should not go against you for any type of public connections, sidewalks, those types of things. So Planning Commission recommendation was to approve with that condition.
This is in District 9, Commissioner Thornton.
Yeah, I actually watched that planning commission meeting, and I thought there were some valid questions that were asked. And since that meeting, I have gotten calls from residents in Saxon Woods area. There were questions, actually, I could not answer, but we will be planning a meeting of residents at New Covenant Church. They allowed us to have a meeting. I think I'll be more in line when this comes back up.
Commissioner Wright.
I have a quick question. Brad, could you go to one of the maps that shows the transcontinental gas line easement? Yeah. So they're not the rules that are around that are being met, right? It's not like they could go over that
Yes,
easement.
that would work. I mean, and that's all going to be subject to any approvals from the gas company too. That's really going to supersede what we would regulate. We've got some subdivisions out there that have been developed with backyards that go into those easements a little bit from years ago, but what they're showing here would be the appropriate way to develop it, staying off of that easement.
Right, and they wouldn't be able to go into that triangle above the gas line.
Not easily. You could possibly cross it, but I'm not sure exactly what that would entail or if it would be cost effective to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like they're leaving it alone for a good reason.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate us looking at this. I do, however, have some concerns, like I've had some concerns with any straight rezoning that comes to this body to look at. I'm just curious as to why they wouldn't have gone the planned development route that assures gives some assurances to the Saxon Woods neighborhood and to the community at large about what this would look like as it's built out. Because once we go to a straight rezone, there's not much, it's a straight rezone at that point, no matter how this looks. So that's major concern there.
Carol?
I likewise have some serious concerns about this development, and as Commissioner Hamby said, that it didn't come in as a planned development is also suspicious to me, and perhaps Brad could talk about the fact that or review for me how the recommendations the planning department made the first time when it was tabled, or I don't know what the right word, but if I remember correctly from the meeting, the DR Horton person said, oh, we just didn't do anything because we didn't really think they were things that needed to be done. When asked about why not have a planned development, the response was, well, we have this and we're going to do this. Well, I mean, this company is a national company with, I don't know, like revenue of $27 billion in 2021. And 45 years of, experience here. If I'm going to have a contractor and hire them, I'm going to want some plans and some things down in print. So I was a little surprised that they would not go about this. I'm also reticent to approve something without a planned development for a company that, has a lot of complaints at the Better Business Bureau website on its rating is quite low, as was brought up by one of the public commenters, but it's right there on the internet for everyone else to see. But Bray, could you address that, the requests that were made the first time through and then not following through on them for this second application?
I think that most of the comments that came from the Planning Commission at the first meeting was from a standpoint that they were looking really for the applicant to consider doing more density on this property, perhaps seeking a different zoning designation that would have allowed more housing styles, possibly intermingling duplexes, triplexes, something like that. At the end of the day, we can't force or require an applicant to do a planned development. In fact, by ordinance, unless they're asking for certain things, the ordinance really directs them that they're not allowed to ask for a planned development unless you're asking for waivers, some design modifications, uses that aren't otherwise provided. You can ask for a binding plan associated with a straight rezone. But in that case, then the subdivision in this case would have had to been reviewed to that level of detail to ensure that everything works. Planned developments certainly do carry that, but if we've got something that could be developed by right, we would really be out of line accepting a PD just for the name of calling it a PD.
Right, but this here, they're not building by right because they're requesting that rezone, right?
They're asking for a straight zoning change, but, I mean, basically the response from the applicant, and Mayor, I missed the initial entry discussion about public input. That was in the back.
There was no public input on this.
But the applicant is here. I don't know if she missed it or just didn't plan on talking, but, so I apologize, but.
Can I respond?
Please approach the podium.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Council and Mayor. I thought it would be best to wait for the Planning Department's presentation first to see the questions if they came up. But if given the opportunity, I am more than willing to speak. So the way that we address rezonings is, as Brad has stated, if we are not seeking any variances to what your ordinance would allow, then we don't go into it as a planned development. What we have presented, we very much consider this to be a binding plan for all intents and purposes, unless something changes significantly with the engineering of the site that would require any shift in the stormwater or anything like that, which is why Planning Commission did put that 5% in there as a condition to allow us that change in the stormwater if that were needed. So we wanted to stay consistent with the area, and as staff has pointed out, RS 25 is consistent with what's in the surrounding area. We did not think that this was the proper place to go in with something that was a very high increased density, and our desire was to create that significant buffer around there for the residents to protect that area. For all intents and purposes for us, this is a binding plan. We've spent nearly $100,000 at this point between this plan, the traffic study, and the tree management plan, and they're all based on this plan. So there there would be no reason for us to change what you're seeing here on these. We believe that this is a plan that is in character for the area, and with the park being so close, it is a prime opportunity to make a use of a public resource that you have approved and placed in that area. We did have a public meeting with the community, with the residents as well. We sent it out to the same list that the county uses to send notices out. So it was 82, 83 people on that list, I believe. And of those notices that we sent out, only one family did show up to be represented at that virtual meeting. We are more than happy to continue to meet with the community if it is the desire of council. I actually even reached out to staff and requested the information of the folks that showed up at Planning Commission, because I did give them my business cards and they did not reach out to me in the time. So I did follow up with the contact that we received and sent an email out to that person. So we are open to the conversations. And again, this is a binding plan for us, as this is the plan that we are utilizing in order to plan other things that are associated with development of the site.
Great, I appreciate it. Let me get your name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tiffany Hogan, D.R. Horton, 1371 Dogwood Drive.
And your last name again?
Hogan, Hogan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant, Commissioner Thornton?
I don't know if it's a question, but Ms. Hogan said it several times, and I was just going to wait and let it, and try to figure it out later after I meet with residents about binding. And you said even that, now you said to us, this is a binding plan, but it has to be us and us. It just can't be you. And my point is, if it was a PD, it would have automatically been binding, right? Is that correct?
Well, and you can have a rezoning, straight rezoning with a binding site plan. PDs are
But you
generally
were
where you have
real
a mix of
clear
uses.
on that meeting that this was binding to you and to your organization, and that was a red flag for me. So maybe we can talk later to see where the communication is kind of went off track. Maybe I misunderstood you that night. Maybe you have a different opinion of binding. But I got to represent this community as a whole. So if you leave your card and your information, I'll reach out to you.
Absolutely. If I may, in case other commissioners are interested in that discussion, as Brad said, in order for it to be considered binding by your municipality, if it's not a PD, then they need to review it in that sense. We did experience some change in staff and a couple of other issues at the initial set out of this application, which caused some delays, and I'm sure he's willing to speak to that more. We don't object to this being a binding plan that the municipality considers binding, and in fact, what I've offered to staff previously is if you want to even add a condition that says that this plan with the date is the plan that will be used in general conformity or whatever the language as a condition to the rezone, we have no issue with that. We would just again ask for the allowance if the engineering requires that the stormwater detention pond is moved or needs to be a little larger or something like that, which is very common with rezonings, that it is specific to a site plan with the condition that if engineering changes anything about the site, that it be allowed. But that's what I meant by binding, Commissioner, that we don't have an issue with it, and we're more than happy for your staff to review it in that manner, but it will extend the time even longer for some delays that were not our fault. And of course, that gets into contractual issues and other things at that point.
I totally appreciate your response. And again, if you would leave your card for me, I would definitely reach out to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Other input from commissioners? I've got Commissioner Houle, then Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you.
What would the process be if we wanted to make the non-binding site plan binding? Would we have to send it back to staff for review and subsequently back through the planning commission to come?
You just allowed me to answer the question. I was going to have to jump in a minute if I wasn't allowed to. I mean, because this came in as a concept plan only, this has not been reviewed for technical design standards to make it binding. So I would be remiss if I didn't strongly discourage you from putting a condition on a plan that has not been reviewed for technical compliance, because you're at that point vesting them into a number of lots, and a layout and all of those things, and our engineers haven't reviewed it, and utilities hasn't. I think that was the reason the Planning Commission added the condition they did, which basically said, okay, if this is approved with a condition, you basically draw an outline around the area that you see up here as a subdivision, and they can do an RS-25 subdivision within that area only, up to as many lots as they can get and meet zoning criteria and meet engineering. But they didn't take it that next step for the same reason that I'm explaining to you now, that it just, you don't even have, you would essentially be granting waivers to things without variances being asked for that you don't have the authority to do.
And a second question, if I may, it struck me that staff recommended denial on the future land use as well, even though, kind of looking at the maps, it seems like the future land use kind of makes sense as residential. So could you elaborate a bit on why staff took that position on the future land use?
I mean, part of the issue at this point was it was another 130 acres of employment zone property that would be coming off the books. And it didn't have the infrastructure for the plat at this point, was not really aware early on in the process, and later became aware of the request for the lift station that's running parallel with this. But it was one that, I think we could have made a recommendation on future land use really, and made an argument either way. But it was trying to retain this land use in this area for potential, and it's within the TAD area too. And so, that generally you're not looking at creating additional residential zoning in those areas for community benefit.
Anyone else for Commissioner Fisher?
So initially, I had met with Ms. Hogan, and initially thought it was in my district. And once I found out where the property was, I said it was Commissioner Thornton's district. Because of, and again, based on what we do, we always talk about housing stock. 216 homes that will possibly be added to that particular area. And of course, as you all know, there's going to be a lot of growth on Newton Bridge Road in the future. So there's opportunity for housing. But again, I want to be respectful of Commissioner Thornton because it's our district, and with the residents, make sure they are pleased with the construction if we move forward with it. But again, and there's enough property out there. It always get me sometimes when we try to stick stuff, housing stock on small acreage, whereas we got close to 120 acres out there to put houses on. So again, I just want to make that comment, and that if we approve this, there's 216 homes out there for families to possibly move in and continue to revitalize the area out there.
Carol again, and then Allison again.
I think we're also going into this planning, this work on the future land use map and the zoning that'll consider what the responsibilities and costs to the community will be in development in certain areas, and the kind of development we want to have in some places. So I'm really careful up in this part of town. I know Saxon Woods is up there past there, and I'm not sure when that happened or how that happened. But I think we have a chance. We've been talking about using the future land use map as a chance to really discuss what's going on in development in certain areas. And so unless I see something, that is so top quality in terms of the kind of housing that it's adding on, and I don't mean quality in terms of being really expensive, but the best community benefit, I just want to be careful and thoughtful and, about how we're adding that housing in so that we have the right kind of housing for the future. I mean, the argument that we need housing, which I'm totally for, needing housing, that could lead us to say, well, let's just approve any kind of housing that's brought forth. I think we need to do it thoughtfully.
Commissioner Wright?
I have a quick question, and it's just for curiosity. It's not necessarily a decision-making point. Is this build to rent or build to sell?
It is a for-sale community.
Okay, thank you.
Jesse?
Yeah, I guess, echoing some remarks I've heard from colleagues, to me, it makes sense we need housing in this community, but for the housing to be put in thoughtfully. And, this is right next to a park, but this proposal doesn't even connect to the park, which is, among the oddities I would note in the non-binding site plan that sits before us and could be dramatically altered. And then, noting that it's in the TAD, there's an opportunity for something to happen here that would give us housing and then some, likely with a design that might be more in line with the changes we're anticipating making to our future land use and comprehensive plan, and certainly changes we've already made, including the inclusionary zoning ordinance. I hear that the intention right now is for these to be sold, but there's nothing requiring them stay that way either. It looks like that's a lot of connected walls. We see those sorts of developments become rentals a lot. So, I have a lot of cautions about proceeding with a non-binding site plan like this and without seizing on the other opportunities that are in place for this area.
Just highlighting a couple of elements. Thank you. Just highlighting a couple of elements. I'm not opposed to housing in this location. I think for the reasons that Commissioner Fisher identified, there's some, kind of viable opportunity for housing, particularly given proximity to the park. Public transit goes very close to here on Vincent Drive. But I would suggest that, details are really significant. And so, that question of maybe a defined building envelope for the neighborhood, given that you are adjacent to another neighborhood, also, were this to be pursued, defining a connection to the park, at a minimum criteria, which staff goes into the agenda report, that may be something like a 12-foot trail, parallel to the frontage of Newton Bridge Road. And then the other piece that I'm kind of interested in hearing Judd's perspective on is the staff report element that describes the intersection improvements that might be motivated by additional housing in this location, particularly at the corner of Newton Bridge and Cathwood, which is an intersection I pass by multiple times a week, particularly in Little League season. And, I know kind of have this legal tension between off-site improvements, but improvements that need to be made because of specific new vehicle trips being introduced into a corridor. So Judd, can you speak to the ability to require the developer to have some payment associated with intersection improvements at Newton Bridge and Cathwood?
And before I put him in that position, because that was the original recommendation that went to the Planning Commission, and the day of or the day prior to the Planning Commission meeting, we revisited based on that intersection's distance from this proposed development and the need to acquire private property, and Transportation and Public Works revised their recommendation that they would need to do that. Kind of pulled back. They identified that there is a need, but instead of wanting it to be made a condition of an approval, that they would have to provide that, like we oftentimes allow or require a large shopping center to put in a signal. They felt like that the rational nexus just really wasn't there in terms of distance and trips generated to put that on this development, so they recanted. We presented that at the Planning Commission. I didn't get that edited in this report, but I will have that done before the voting meeting.
Thanks, Brad. I hadn't viewed that meeting. I appreciate that.
And I do appreciate Brad explaining that, because that did come up at the Planning Commission meeting. And it seemed like, to me, there was a little bit of, not pushback, but a little bit of concern that the planning, the recommendations came late. That's what I think. The recommendations came late. And the, Ms. Hogan, she addressed it, but she made it really clear that it just came late. I'll just leave it like that. So those were some things that have not been, those are the kind of things I just would like to get clearer on. But that did come up, Mayor.
And of course, a much nearer intersection is Vincent and Newton Bridge. I don't know if that was examined by staff, Brad. Was that under discussion at any point?
It was looked at as well, and there were also issues with level of service that intersection generated, but there were no recommendations specifically made on improvements at that intersection.
Okay. I mean, again, I don't think it's a bad location for residential stock. You know, economic development does note that, you know, we would have to be conscious of seeking some employment opportunities in other places in the county should this not be available for employment. But, you know, I would recommend that some of these details be shored up before a final decision. Go ahead, Jesse, and then I'll get it.
As the conversation on vehicle trips gets going, I'll just point out, you know, this is another entirely auto-centric design with essentially let's imagine that this was a binding site plan for a second. There's essentially this little private park within this development that you have to drive to, that you're only really going to access if you live in it, along these private roads within the development. And it's right next to a giant public park, y'all. I mean, the epitome, I think, of bad design would be to build a residential neighborhood that doesn't connect to the immediately adjacent public park and instead creates its own private micro park with nowhere near the amenities. So yeah, I have a hard time getting on board with this without some substantial changes.
Any other input before we move on to the next one? Commissioner Thornton, go right ahead.
And now that we have delved into TADs, I do think there was a conversation that I would like to have, and what community benefits could come out of this. So I just would like to appreciate the time. I'm going to call Ms. Hogan and invite her to speak with the residents when we meet, and maybe things can turn around a little bit.
All right, thanks, everyone. We've got one other planning and zoning item tonight.
Okay, next item is 195 Bray Street. This is a request to rezone from RS5 to RM2. Again, concept plan only to build 46 multifamily units. We've given you the breakdown there, but really this is about rezoning a piece of property from RS5 to RM2, and not as much about the design at this point. You see the property here outlined. It's located right in the curve there of Bray Street behind Department of Family and Children's Services. Okay. Currently zoned RS5, adjacent to government zoning. That's the school property to the right. Commercial zoning to the north, and then the RM1 property that consists currently of the daycare and the short-term multifamily that was put in a part of the BRAC process on North Avenue adjacent to it. And it would be changing to RM2. Again, here's the concept plan that they are showing. The issues surrounding this property is, and I'm going to do it again, Commissioner Davenport, I'm just going to quit. Very bottom, the point in the bottom, and that's not completely accurate. We've got a couple different surveys. One of them appears to indicate that this property actually has about 15 feet of frontage on Bray Street. Another one appears that it doesn't. That's kind of an unopened road stub, the little strip that you see that runs up kind of across the entry adjacent to the Department of Labor property. But you know, the real issue with this property at this point, before any development of any real density can be put in, is they've got to figure out a way to access it. And honestly, and they've acknowledged it at the Planning Commission meeting, you know, going forward, if this zoning is approved, probably the most logical approach for them to take would be to pursue some type of an easement to get access to the Department of Family and Children's Services driveway, which is property that's owned by Athens-Clarke County that we lease to them. But none of that has been worked out. This is a rezoning that is tied to a LIHTC application that is due in a couple of months for a low-income housing tax credit. The agent is the land trust, but they're working with a third-party individual that would do the development, and so they're kind of operating under a timeline. They've got to have appropriate zoning in place in order for that application to be competitive. Recommendation from Planning Commission, they felt like it was very consistent with future land use in the area, zoning generally in the area. It adds housing on an appropriate infill location. It is very close to many services. It lacks connectivity that we just talked about and access, but it was recognized by the the applicant's agent that these are issues that must be resolved prior to site development. They don't have access directly to frontage. They're not going to be able to develop the property, but they still, Planning Commission felt like this was a very appropriate location for RM2, and then moving forward, they could work through the design details before they would develop. So the recommendation is to approve.
Right. Commissioner Taylor's in District 2.
While I am very aware of our housing crisis, I would like to see more detail as far as this development goes. I think that it is the location is it is accessible for residents as far as being on the transit line, as well as having retail and a grocery store, as well as, but I just have to have more information. Because we can say yeah, and they can say low housing, but then, you know, when stuff gets worked out, it doesn't always end that way. So for me, I'm gonna need more information as far as particulars.
Brad, just on the LIHTC component, when we approved the project just past Kroger on Highway 72, did we require as a condition that it be a project for which low-income housing tax credits were applied to get their CO or their?
We did, but it was, we did not add it as a condition. It was a self-imposed part of their application for their special use permit, that this project would be built using, I think that was the 4% tax credit that they were willing to commit to as a condition, which we generally approach that if a development or a developer is willing to specifically indicate those types of regulations, we're always more comfortable than trying to impose them as a condition that they didn't ask for.
Right.
In this case, it has not been asked for, but they have made it known that that's the reason for trying to not work out the access before they get the zoning in order to meet the deadline for the tax credit.
Okay. Got Ovita and Dexter and a couple of others.
One point of order, maybe I spaced, did we take public input on this?
So when we are at an agenda setting meeting, we take input on zoning as an old and new business item. So we collectively take public input at the front end of the meeting.
Okay. I want to say this property has been a haven for the homeless. And the person, if you look at your sheet, the person's name who actually owns it has been at us forever and a day to deal with. I don't think well, maybe she did want to sell it, I don't know. But I think this is the time that is right. I do think that Commissioner Taylor definitely needs to get some more information. But where it's located at, it's actually, is that a TAD area? Is that?
If it's not in the TAD, it's immediately adjacent.
Okay. And the other thing that's important about that area, I think I mentioned a couple of months ago, or a month ago, that the CVS is closed, and it actually is closed now. If there's no development going over there, that whole end of off of North Avenue is going to deteriorate very fast. Adjacent to Bray Street, there's an empty daycare center. And I think when Advantage was here and they made their presentation, and they said they were looking at what they could do with that daycare center as far as opening. So there's a lot of opportunity, and it's going to be a big need. Right now, I'm real concerned about the CVS closing. They're hanging out up there already. It's starting to kind of look like another area of town. So I do think that this has a good opportunity, and on the other side of that, I think Project Safe has the apartments for mothers and programs. So
I think that they would be right beside each other.
Huh?
They would be right beside,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
development, and they would be right beside each other.
They'll be right there together. So it is kind of residential already, but like I said, I'm really concerned about that part of North Avenue with CVS closing. We still have a serious homeless problem there, and I do know that the owner of this property has been very concerned about the homeless on that property.
And there is actually a homeless encampment there.
So any pertinent to the project itself, Commissioner Fisher?
No, Brad, these are apartments or homes? These apartments?
The proposal that they've provided in concept form only is apartments. It would be multifamily, yes, sir.
Other input on this item? Jesse?
With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, and I don't even know if the folks who are in the audience are here for these items, but my experience on this body has been that we have taken public input during the planning and zoning items, which historically have been at the end of the agenda separately, and also that's how it's written on our agenda, so I feel like maybe, understand maybe the desire to change that protocol moving forward, but should we at least check while we're here?
I did call for input on 8 through 23.
I understand. Yeah, if we're going to change the way we're taking public input on these during agenda setting meetings, I feel like we might want to refresh the way the agenda is structured to reflect that. I'm not against making that change. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes sense.
We can
to
just
the
note that for all those items. But that was the call. Any other input on this item? All right, these are the only two planning and zoning items, so we'll move on to other old and new business items. Thank you, Brad, I appreciate it. All right, item 10 is an old business item, and we discussed this at work session, of course. And this is the food and bar equipment services contract regarding the Classic Center.
Move to consent.
Can I make one comment?
Absolutely.
With the information that came out last week or earlier this week about the UGA and the partnership with the Classic Center Arena, do we need to look at that? Would this change anything?
I don't think there's anybody from the Classic Center Authority here tonight. I've not gotten any indication that they were interested in a different version of
Okay,
this.
that's fine. I was just curious if we need to look at anything different.
Because I think generally those, under any use, the food and beverage areas would remain the same. There's a motion to move to consent. Other folks okay with consent? All right, I'm going to move 10 to consent. All right, 11 is that CDBG annual action plan. Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Mayor. I also have some concerns about CDBG, how we hand out our grants and how we score things, based on we got a vision committee that score differently from our staff, and again, some agencies get omitted, and I understand that, and again, staff does a great job, so I'm not blaming staff or pointing fingers at staff, but I'm not gonna support this when we get ready to vote. I'm gonna vote no on this, because I think the way that we hand out our grants, when we pick committees or people from the community join committees, ask for their input, sometimes that input get ignored for whatever reason. And again, I know the manager was nice enough to send me email about, they did that on average. But, and then, of course, everybody on the vision committee did not take part in the particular scoring of these nonprofits. The nonprofits that got money, I applaud them. But again, and again, mainly I'm looking at the Council on Aging. There was a number one priority for the vision committee. We got a community, especially the elderly community, that sometimes get ignored. And again, so I don't know what all was taken into consideration when we do give out these monies. And again, I appreciate what staff do, but again, I just don't like, I guess how the process is done and then who gets what. Because again, we had, for example, affordable housing, we had 4 people to apply for those, I'm assuming for those grants. All 4 of them got it. For economic development, we had 5, and then for public service, we had 12. And then if you go back and look at the scoring, it just wasn't consistent in some of the scoring and how it was done. And again, and I'm just going to use what really stuck out at me when I see Athens Council on Aging gets a 1 by the Vision Committee, staff gives it a 10. That's a huge discrepancy for us on again, and I don't know what all they look at, so I'm not privy to that information for what they look at when they're scoring what a nonprofit should get. But again, I got some concerns, and again, but I'm not going to knock any of the people that we gave money to. I applaud them; they do good work. But I just think to me, it just seems there'll be some inconsistency on how we give out these funds. So,
Mike?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And I just, in listening to some of the concerns and comments earlier tonight, probably a CDO might be in order for some of this so that we can address some of the concerns that have been brought to our attention this evening. I would like to ask some questions, however, about the attachment number 1, the reprogrammed and reprogrammable CDBG funds. Is that a result of an organization that may have received funds that weren't able to use the dollars, or how did those typically come about? And are there organizations on here that are getting recommended that weren't able to use the dollars from previous, if that makes any...
Yes, my understanding is, on the first question, that yes, they can be sometimes leftover funds from
Right.
other. I don't know the answer to your second question.
Okay, maybe in an email that would be suffice. And the third question is, I know it's sometimes we have to give money back to the federal government for whatever reason. Is there a case in this year's situation or last year's situation where that has happened?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay.
Just so everybody can hear.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out. It seemed like we were getting a little bit less this year, were we? Or?
Calculation fluctuates.
Okay. But no, I'd certainly be interested in the reprogramming and reprogrammed and reprogrammable funds, because that may help us figure out a commission-defined option. So.
And I would say that over time, the amount of CDBG funds we've got has gone down.
Yes, it sure has. And home funds, I think, too.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Ovita?
And I think, Mike, first of all, I do agree with Commissioner Fisher about that, it didn't have a good look with the vision committees prioritizing, and it was just such a huge gap. And to be honest with you, I've noticed it over the years, but for a positive point, is it possible to do a CDO? And when would that have to be in if that was the case? I guess I need to be asking the mayor, I'm sorry.
So, yes, it is possible to do a commission-defined option. There are some prescribed manners in which community development block grant funds have to be allocated. So, for example, the services component can only be 15% of the total package. And so I would encourage you very quickly, very soon, to work with staff just to make sure that your interest in a commission-defined option lines up with those federal requirements so it's done appropriately. But yes, that is an option and has been done in the past. Carol?
Yeah, I'm also interested in talking with some of my colleagues about a CDO. I do you know that the public service area which is where there were so many applicants, they have the least amount of money with only 15%. So hard choices have to be made where there was just more monies available for those other groups. I am concerned, we heard some speakers tonight speak about the money for the transgender services with the Women's Nurses Clinic. And I would like perhaps to get from the manager's office an explanation on that discussion, not an explanation of why it's not on there, but between listening to the work session and then seeing what was in the agenda report, I just want a clarification again on what the rationale was for that one not making the list again. But also, I think right now there's a lot going on in this state with that legislation that just passed today that actually applies to minors. And people may disagree about this, but with transgender services for minors and prohibiting medical care for that, this is part of a whole nationwide political agenda to attack transgender people, and we are in a community here that is very supportive and inclusive, working with the nurses clinic on this. I just really want to think carefully about this and what it represents here in the community. This is a time where people are. This is an emergency situation for the transgender community. And I just would like to rethink that with some of my colleagues and see if we can address that and if there's any interest in doing that. Thank you.
Jesse.
Question and then a couple thoughts on this. I appreciate you pointing out, Mr. Mayor, that there are these federal requirements around how much of the total CDBG money can go toward the challenge grants, and the $183,000 total we see here is basically 15% of what's available, which is the max we can put towards these proposals. I did also recall from our work session, I'm seeing on the slides here, that we had a maximum of 6 organizations that we were going to award to. Was that our own policy, or was that also a federal stipulation?
I'd have to look into that.
I think that would be helpful to know, just so if a CDO is to come forward, are we limited to 6 total organizations, or can we actually go to 7 and reduce the amount to each?
I don't think we're limited to 6, but That's
correct. You're right.
Yeah. Okay. So theoretically, one way to go here is to shave off a little bit off of the 6 to add a 7th or something. Of course, that runs against the other thing that I'm often talking about, which is that, if we don't substantially fund the initial requests, we don't really set them up to succeed at meeting the proposal. I've read through all the staff materials we were sent. I really appreciate all of that being gathered. And, the most important thing, this is from one of the reports, the most important thing to note about this process is that the Vision Committee prioritizations are not a consensus of the committee, but rather represent an average of each individual member's priorities. Hear that, and maybe there's a flaw to how we get the rankings before us that we get, but nonetheless, that is the process that's set up. And so we don't have anything else to go on besides that to try to be objective. So recognizing that is the process that we have, I look at what the Vision Committee priorities are, and then I look at where staff is recommending changing those priorities based on criteria. And I felt like in the work session, a decent explanation was given for what was the Vision Committee's #1 priority, ACCA, being bumped because they have access to other funds that they thought could meet the needs of that proposal. I'd like maybe some clarity on whether that's definitely the case for that organization before we assume that that's true. I thought that a decent explanation was given for why Georgia Conflict Center, which was ranked 6th, ahead of some of the ones that staff injected in, was not being recommended because they've had so much carryover that there's concern that they'd really be able to pull it off and use the money, which puts everybody in a bad position of, even being able to get the same amount of CDBG money next year. What I did not hear was a good explanation for why the Athens Pride and Queer Collective proposal, in conjunction with the Athens Nurses Clinic, was being denied, except that they were new. But, that rubs up against, how no one can ever get in the door until they get in the door the first time, And when I heard, why was Chess and Community and the ARC on here, because staff thought those were important and, couldn't imagine not supporting Chess and Community again. And look, these are tough decisions. You know, I'm not going to pretend like it's easy to pick from a too long list, you know, which 6 get the awards. So you try to use an objective criteria. And what I'm struggling to make sense of is where the criteria that's before us, which is the Vision Committee's rankings, being changed by staff has a rationale that was applied consistently, specifically in this case with regards to Athens Pride and Queer Collective. I love Chesson Community, I love the ARC. I don't get why, and I'm hoping staff can clarify this for us, why those organizations' proposals, which were ranked lower by the Vision Committee, got bumped up by staff over the Nurses Clinic Athens Pride and Queer Collective proposal, except that proposal came from an organization that's newly applying. But, you know, as people who spoke at the podium today pointed out, you know, they've been around for a long time, perhaps under a different name before they were the Athens Pride and Queer Collective. The Nurses Clinic has been around and well-established for a long time, and that's a partner in this application.
Well, if I might, Mr. Mayor,
Please.
and I'll certainly, as Commissioner Myers asked, follow up with a more complete answer. So the staff priorities for the applications they were based on goal priorities that were set by, you know, and one's affordable housing, one's economic development, one's youth enrichment, one's homelessness, one's special populations, and the other's public facilities. So hold that for 1 second. So those are the goals that are being looked at, and HUD requires that all recommended applications meet at least one of the defined consolidated plan goals, okay? And I'm told by staff that the application submitted by the collective noted that the gender-affirming medical care project met consolidated plan goal number 5, special populations, based on the project providing medical assistance to low or low-income populations in need of this affirming medical care. Now, in the instructions, the full definition of Consolidated Plan Goal 5, special populations, is to enhance the quality of life for individuals with mental illness, individuals with a substance use disorder, individuals with disabilities, individuals who are formerly incarcerated, and seniors. And in reading through the application, it was not clear to staff how the project met the definition of those for this particular project. I'll send all that to you in writing, and certainly we can have discussions with staff and the applicant to see if somehow something was misunderstood, but that's what staff has relayed to me in this instance.
Well, I will point out just as, you know, one final thought on this for today. I think that some of our speakers tonight and some of the written correspondence we've gotten has done a good job of highlighting the overlap between high suicide rates and other mental health struggles and people who are seeking but fail to get access to gender-affirming care. I'm sure everyone in this room is well aware of the work being done in the state legislature to make it that much harder for transgender individuals to get access to care, which makes those negative outcomes, you know, suicide, self-harm, et cetera, that much more likely, and puts that much more burden on our already struggling mental health care providers. So in my mind, there is a way that this proposal aligns with the special populations language.
Thanks. Allison?
Yeah, I like everybody's discussion and us learning how we can put a commission-defined option together. Clearly, adding more time is not possible. This is a time-based decision, so let's keep that in mind as we work together to move some numbers around. I also agree that the Athens Pride and Queer Collectives teaming up with the Nurses Center. I wonder if it had started off with the Nurses Center as the headline with the partnership. I'm not surprised why the two names weren't together in it, but with the application that might have garnered a little more of that longevity in the community that they're looking for. But I don't think that it's a stretch. I think that it is a special population, and I think that we would want to help people not get to the point where they're in substance abuse, have mental illness, and are suicidal by the lack of ability that this project is offering. So in facts and issues, and this will probably be just a follow-up with the emails from staff, or Kelly, you might know, Mayor Gertz, you might know the answer. In 6, it talks about for a more strategic approach to the public services activities. They have decided that the minimum threshold of funding is $30,000. So that's where we're seeing that. But if we do a commission-defined option and we wanted to spread out that amount, we could, that threshold is just a guideline if we
So
wanted to
that's-
define differently. Is that correct?
That's departmental practice, but it's not embedded in ordinance.
Okay.
So certainly,
Okay.
this body could make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Ovita?
One of the things that Manager Williams is recommending is how we're doing our interagency monies in the future for next year. I think we also should look at how the Vision Committee and the Vision representatives and staff are communicating, and that might need to change, because apparently there's something that the Vision Committee does not know, or there's something, I just think maybe we need to put that on our list, Mayor, to look at how that process, it rolls out, so we don't, even if we fix this time, and then the next go around, and those numbers are so different from the score, it just looks bad. So maybe just need to tweak it a little bit, make sure everybody has the same information, and because I definitely appreciate community involvement on a process like this.
And we've revised elements of our Vision Committee process in the past, and that's something we definitely could look at on the committee level.
Yeah.
By government operations, for example.
Yeah.
Dexter?
Yeah, so I'd like to ask the manager also to provide me the same thing that Commissioner Houle asked for when we were scoring for the council on aging for, what they looking at, especially since seniors are mentioned in this particular programming. So just, again, when we want to look at trying to provide equity, we need to try to do it across the board as much as we can. So again, I just like to see those moving forward.
All right, so again, if folks are interested in coalescing around a commission-defined option, do encourage you to talk to the manager so we can make sure that gets lined up legally appropriately for expenditure of these federal funds. So thanks, everyone. All right, item 12 is extension of the FY23 nonprofit leases. And so what's contemplated in this agenda item is to continue that $1 a year dynamic through mid-fiscal year 2024 to give us some time. Oh, excuse me, yes, this is the one. To give us some time so that, based on Attorney Drake's input, we can do a more careful job defining how we receive some community benefit from those organizations. So, Commissioner Davenport?
Yeah, I just thought we had settled this for July, June, but that's fine.
I think staff perceived that was going to take just a little time to finesse that, and we didn't want to rush up against the deadline of July 1st. Josh, do you want to?
Sure, we can speak to that. So typically, Central Services would have sent letters by now to all the leasees. So in order to give the GOC time to address this, we needed to extend the lease. So this is giving us those 6 months of those first 6 months of next fiscal year for GOC to finish their work. So we're just giving some room in the calendar for the GOC to revisit it, is what this is all about.
Breathing room.
I'm just saying, we just keep, well, yeah, I can't complain. I know this is how government works. It's just, because I'm part of it too, but just kicking that can.
Commissioner Davenport, I do appreciate your fervent desire to get things to finality, and this is one where, my friend, I am excited about some finality, without a doubt, that we can just permanently adopt and then use year in, year out. Carol?
Yeah, has the mayor given the GOC any guidelines about what they should be reviewing in this nonprofit leasing policy?
Yes, so the guidelines are to look at stronger definition within the community benefit component, and I believe staff in the attorney's office have some ideas about how that can come into daylight.
I think concerns of lack of explicit criteria related to,
I'm with you.
We know
Great.
how important as a public body good criteria are, my
Yes.
friends. Allison?
I just wanted to say that the property committee is getting a beta testing of the whole community benefits, not in the millions of dollars like you guys did, all the hard work for the mall and the TAD, but we've got a community benefits agreement within a request for proposal that's out right now, seeking applicants, or applicants are seeking it, and that's part of our criteria in assessing tenants for what our assignments are in the property committee. So I appreciate that more time has been added, and that we'll do our best to see if we can't help. And it's a good thing that Commissioner Davenport is also on the property committee, so that the overlaps of what we work through and study in property committee can be helpful for GOC after they do the parklets.
Vita?
I also have a problem kicking the can down the road over and over again. But I objected when we started charging some folk and to make, it looked like we made a situation worse when we started calculating rent for some of our nonprofits. Our nonprofits do a good job in having services open to the community. And I think that when I mentioned about the community benefits, I didn't mean to put extra restrictions on them, plus having them pay. That was never the intent. The intent was to take a situation that was unjust and unfair and level the playing field. Some groups are never going to get that money back that they've paid over the years. And I don't know how much money or what we do with the rents that we get. Is it going to be that much money that this county can't handle it? So, no, I don't think any nonprofit that represents and opens their doors to this community should be strapped in with rules and regulations, then pay to do a service to this community. And if you could figure out a way what those other groups that have been paying all the years, if they can get their money back, then we start with a clean slate for everybody. But Judd already told me they can't get their money back. So everybody should be on the same level.
Everybody okay putting this on consent?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, 12 will go to consent. Thank you all. All right, 13 is addition of a case manager, peer support position for the comprehensive opioid, stimulant, and substance abuse site-based program. There's currently a single individual managing this, and this would expand our ability.
Consent.
And this is a grant-funded position.
Consent.
Consent.
Everybody okay with this consent? Okay. 13 is consent as well. All right. 14 is a consummated GOC report on public pedestrian connector acquisition policy. Commissioner Davenport, as chair, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, so I just want to thank Wright and Hamby. I know they have been talking about this for a long time, so this has finally come to fruition. And I thank staff as well for working so hard. We literally narrowed it down from, I think, 180 listed properties down to 6 potential. But this pretty much deals with quick claim right-of-ways and dealing with, just making sure that pedestrians can make sure that our pedestrians can get to and from different points of interest, and that Clarke County does its due diligence and make sure that everything is paid properly. Did I say that right? Okay, I hope I did.
Mike?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And certainly, Commissioner Wright and I've been working on this for a bit, but before us,
there were quite a few commissioners working on Pars Alley here is what it's referred to, and it's in between. And there's some other ones on the list. But what this report out of government ops does is get the ball rolling so that we can address this one and other ones that come along. So we have to do the quick claim first, and then get some cost estimates on how to fix it and such as that. I will say this, at the last meeting, I think I told you my folks have moved to Athens, and my dad did watch the meeting last time when I talked about him may have difficulty going around the roundabout. He said he would not have difficulty going around the roundabout, but on this issue, I think he would have difficulty going up and tripping and falling, especially, and I'm gonna say this on TV because he was giving him a hard time about it, mentioning the port that he likes to drink. So I could see him going to the package store, getting his bottle of port and tripping and falling and breaking his bottle of port on the trail there. It's of course a hazard, but the only way we can do anything about it is for the adjoining property owners to quit claim it to us, and then we can get in there and see what we can do to fix it. And I'm sure there'll be lots of community input on this. So thank you. And thanks staff for putting it together.
Yeah, I looked at this, and I'm all for helping Commissioner Hamby's father and anyone else in areas, but I was curious. I mean, when it came down to it, there was a list of, all these different rights of way and alleys, and there was this one group that was looked at. There were only 5 items in there, right? And the one thing I was wondering is if you all, I guess it says here, once ACC staff has determined the corridor in question meets the baseline criteria outlined above, the mayor and commission will determine if additional action will be taken to acquire public pedestrian connections. Such determination will be made on a case-by-case basis by the mayor and commission on the merits of each corridor, which seems vague to me, only because when I looked at 2 of them, they seem to be in cul-de-sacs and subdivisions in very, not, they're isolated cul-de-sacs, and there's probably some little path that runs through from one part to another. And I didn't want to put us in a situation where we have put criteria in there that isn't specific enough, and that somehow a future commissioner body somehow gets us in a situation where we are making a paved path between 2 cul-de-sacs in a sort of a very, in a subdivision with half-acre lots. And I just was wondering if that was addressed.
It was, and Manager Williams can weigh in on this as well, and I think it was Assistant Manager Edwards with us, helping us through this. I think there are some safeguards in here that address that. For one, if there is action to come before this body to address an issue, then it requires 100% of the adjoining property owners to agree to the quitclaim. Mm-hmm. So and that's the first step. And then beyond that, if they don't have the 100%, then it doesn't move forward. So I think that's the biggest safeguard you can have in there, because reaching that 100% means that the neighborhood wants it or whatnot. I know our staff looked at over 800. I think it was over 800 alleyways or potential alleyways in town, and narrowed it down to those that are passable through for pedestrians, or could be passable for pedestrians if they were fixed in some way, and they were obviously pedestrian or bike traveled routes. So we did look at those criteria to try to narrow the list down, simply because it would be just overwhelming to look at 800 alleyways that are here in Athens. So it accurately.
Yes, Commissioner, and there are eligibility criteria that after that quitclaim that Commissioner Hamby talked about, staff would then review to see if it meets the eligibility. It would come back to Mayor and Commission. There's no funding associated with this in the budget.
Right, I was glad of that, yeah.
So
yes.
that's why it's coming back to Mayor and Commission as well, because at that point, Mayor and Commission will have to identify funding based on what that potential estimated cost is.
Okay, so there was criteria in there I just missed, or that's in, maybe.
So attachment 1 has public pedestrian connector eligibility criteria on it.
Okay, I'll review that.
And we're happy to answer any question you have,
Okay.
Commissioner Myers.
Thank you.
Jesse?
Thanks. I have echoes of the NTMP, the Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan, ringing in my head as we look at this. And, we passed that change of policy, and then staff was flooded with a bunch of suggestions by us, and I think maybe a few from the public as well, for neighborhoods and roads to consider. And, we've heard since how much they're trying to deal with just a massive amount that dwarfs the amount they used to deal with. And, I'm understanding this policy to be a policy that exists beyond the 5 examples listed in the attachment. It's just that we're starting with those 5, is that right?
No, actually, as we wrote this GOC report, one of the reasons I think that the GOC wanted to be so specific and only look at this one type of alley is because it would limit the number of alleys that we would be potentially looking at and focused on and spending.
So once these 5 are
funding on.
looked at, the policy is basically irrelevant? Is that-
So TPW and planning staff who helped support the GOC in this, as they applied this policy to all the alleys, all of the 800 alleys that Commissioner Hamby mentioned, these were the only ones that in their mind would qualify. Now, that doesn't mean there couldn't be one more that we missed or 2, but it is a very small portion of the total number of alleys in Athens-Clarke County.
Okay, and so that this comes with the expectation then that there isn't a revisiting of this to look at the other 700 plus after we get through these 5?
So,
I'm just trying to make sense of, because we pass this and then someone's inevitably going to ask us about another alley.
overthinking it. So there was a lot of property that are not, like, we looked at the property off of, was it Paris Street, and there was just a slither of property that nobody claimed, but people could possibly use in the future as an alleyway. So the first step is should the county take ownership of it, because that little slither of property between the 2 property lines, nobody actually owned it. But, you can see in the future, well, if you potentially see in the future how between the 2 neighborhoods, how that little slither of property could have become an alleyway, and then the users the residents will say, well, it's not my property, and it's not the government property, but since it's been used as an alleyway for the betterment of the community, how about the government take over it? So there are some criteria that are put in place where you have to get 100%. The first step is the county has to have an interest in being interested in taking over. Then 100% of the people, of the resident nearby will have to agree to the county taking care of that. But we narrowed it down because just the technicality and the definition of alleyways, from downtown alleyways to side street alleyways, it's too much for, it was.
Manager Williams, do you want to highlight some of how we funneled down to just a handful of properties?
Well, I wouldn't dispute anything that GOC members or Assistant Manager Edwards has shared. I don't feel like there's a lot of exposure, Commissioner Houle, and certainly we can see how this, specific segment and limited segment, as far as we know, how that works out, and then if the commission wanted to expand the priority slowly. That was our concern going in. Commissioner Fisher mentioned equity and being fair and setting precedent. That was a concern, and I really want to thank Commissioners Wright, Hamby, and former Commissioner Edwards, who have been very interested in this for some years, for going with the process and helping to think it through. So I think staff and GOC feel like this is a good, first policy, and then maybe we try that on and see how it works.
Carol?
So this is only a property that does not have someone owning it, right?
Well, let me correct that. Every piece of property is owned by somebody.
Or the county.
Now, but let me, I think, qualify that. So there may be an alley that shows up, okay? And some people would call that right-of-way, then some people conflate that with public right-of-way, which means the county owns it. But in fact, the developer may plat an alley just for the public to transit that at some point in the future, but it's technically owned by each adjacent property owner that goes to the middle line of the alley. That's typically how that works.
And then on top of that, this policy is only for open improved right-of-way, right?
Okay.
So it's an open right-of-way and it's an improved right-of-way. So some of those examples you saw listed, there are some improvements already there.
Used for passage.
That's right.
So shrubs would not qualify.
That's
because it's not,
Okay.
not suitable for passage. So, consent,
Yes.
Yeah.
quickly?
Quick, was these are, I would suggest that perhaps, well, one consider whether or not these transportation corridors for foot and bike be added to the Athens in Motion plan, where some of them, where there's a nice tiering criteria, and some of them that are more important might like pop up to the top and be right there in a first tier, but some that are in remote corners of subdivisions might be like prioritized lower, you know, that, consider that, just consideration.
Mr. Mayor, I'm good with the way the committee brought it out after studying it, which wasn't assigning it to another oversight.
Oh.
So I'm good with it on consent as is.
All right, everybody good with consent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to everybody's favorite annual item, the calendar year 23 pavement maintenance program.
Consent.
Well, I'd actually leave it off, if y'all don't mind. I need to look at the list. and
People may
make
be
sure.
interested in,
Yeah.
sometimes have questions about
I
it.
definitely, since I can't never get an answer to my question.
Yeah, I
So
just need
yes,
to- I need
please
to-
take it
Put
off.
your letter by it.
Just check the list.
Number 5.
We'll leave that off consent?
Yes, yes.
All right, any questions broadly about the program or funding sources? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to 16. And of course, this is the second year we've expanded summer youth programming, in both cases last summer and this summer using some American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so this is the funding recommendations based upon the submission.
Can I comment first?
Please do.
Before we move. Thank you, and appreciate the committee for giving these nonprofits money for the summer. I also appreciate what we put in our budget with the $500,000 that we will be using, hopefully to open up those community centers moving forward with the Housing Authority. But what I want to emphasize as we move forward, as we continue to looking at how we're going to spend our monies on youth development, I really want us to be intentional about looking at impact on, when we're giving out money and outcomes. And I don't want us in the future, it looks good when we give out 50,000, 40,000, 30,000, that looks good. But I think if we really want to make an impact on youth development in our community, we got to invest enough money so we can find out what is happening with our young people when it comes to violence, come to gang activity. And I think we have to do it over long term instead of on the short term. What these organizations are doing this summer, they're doing some great things, helping kids to read. Divas Who Win, working with abused ladies and sex trafficking. These are great things, and you can see some impact on those for those 3 months. But I think if we really gonna put a dent, and if we really gonna concentrate on gang violence and youth violence and gang recruitment, we got to be intentional, and we need to spend our money wisely when we start looking at how we're gonna use our ARPA funds moving forward, and who we're gonna partner with to make these things happen.
And I apologize, I meant to email everybody earlier today. I've got a draft that you will receive, but right now we're looking at April 28th in the afternoon, to sit down and talk about that as well as the workforce expenditures. So just know that that deeper conversation is upcoming.
Okay, well, I just want to go on record with this.
When was that again?
Yeah.
April 28th, so a little over a month from now. It's a Friday in the afternoon.
That's when the
That's during the
ACCG
ACCG conference.
Yeah, we'll be gone.
Yeah.
that 4 of us will
That's
be
a
at.
Friday.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
All right,
We'll work it out.
we would look at another day if folks are out of town at ACCG then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at
Okay.
least 4 of us are going to
All
be
right.
gone. Yeah.
All right, yeah, I couldn't make that, so it wasn't on my calendar. Patrick?
No, that's all about it. So
Okay.
like, that date sounds familiar.
We will look at another day then. That's good. Ovita?
I do think that we got to be clear on our outcomes when we give out this money to community groups. They do great work, but it's not even a but. I really would like some language that does say something about against criminal gang activity. I mean, whether it's elementary school, Everybody should have the same target. I would love for groups to, normally we teach leadership, public speaking, we have reading and craft classes, but we should be able to intertwine activities and programs to deter young people. So they're still learning about leadership, but also how do we deter them? The earlier we can deter them from gang activity and make, we can't wait till they're 25. And so I hope that when we meet, Kelly, are you saying Mayor, are you saying you're going to redo your calendar?
Yeah, so it won't be the 28th,
Okay, right.
since four folks are going to be in Savannah, but maybe we'll look at the next Friday or some other period. I'll send out a doodle.
I think whatever we shoot out for whoever, that is our problem now, is drugs and gangs. And we have to deter kids away from both and not just do the fun things, because that's how you also learn. But I think we're sometimes scared about using that word, and it's happening every day. In my community, it's happening every day, or almost every day. So if we don't spell it out in however we distribute this money, I think we're going to be missing a great opportunity.
And of course, in our ARPA discussions, we've said violence prevention is the reason that we're concerned about this. And obviously, we began with the summer, recognizing that that's just a time when there are fewer activities and there's more negative opportunity, and we want to replace that negative opportunity with positive opportunity. Jesse.
I know it's a slightly longer title, but I think reflecting this discussion and the CDO that was originally passed about this, more than a year ago, to always refer to this bucket as youth development and violence prevention, which is actually how we've defined the bucket, instead of shortcutting to just youth development over and over, would be helpful. It might help us start 2 steps ahead of where our conversation starts every time we bring this up.
And then we can put that on the agenda. Does anyone want to just put this on consent, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it a positive.
I'd be happy to put it on consent if the phrase youth development will be replaced with youth development and violence prevention throughout the document.
That's easily done.
You got it.
I'm good.
Easily
You
done.
got it.
That's
We'll make that change.
knocking that out of the park.
Okay.
All right. All right, we're moving on to 17, and of course, at our work session recently, we discussed Memorial Park improvements. Input on this item?
I don't want to put it on
Well,
consent.
any discussion of this item?
Just to make sure that, can I get some clarification for the trees, for the
The four.
the four thingy, the park benches throughout the loop, the turtle island, and I know some of our commissioners are just that lower loop, just clarification for that lower loop area to possibly potentially turn that to pedestrian walkway and address some of the concerns about parking.
I think we addressed that in work session.
But that's it.
So, and of course, this is a concept phase.
Concept, I get it.
Concept.
Yes, okay, well, never mind, consent then.
Other input?
Consent's fine.
Consent.
Consent, okay?
Yeah.
That's-
Patrick said yes.
Okay. All right, we're going to go 17 consent.
Excellent.
All right. 18, again, seen at our recent work session, and these are the preliminary plans and right-of-way plans and right-of-way acquisition, and the final design task order for the Hancock West Broad Street intersection. Mike?
Sure. I mean, this has been on the docket for quite a while, since we started the first TSPLOST. It was part of that, and we were able to leverage some dollars from the state's involvement in this, and I'm excited about this project and look forward to it being on consent.
Dexter?
And again, I'm new to the party, and since I've been elected as commissioner sworn in, I have had calls about this and concerns about people living in that area, and I know we had town hall meetings about it, and seemed like everybody was for it, but there's still some people that's uncomfortable with that. But, so I guess my question is though, has the money already been allocated and for us to move forward though? I mean, is this pretty much a done project?
So certainly lots of design work has already been done, and so that's allocation of a lot of funds for engineers and planners. Obviously, construction is a much more significant thing, and so we've already earmarked some funds, and the state has earmarked quite a bit of money for this as well. So always a chance to say, no, we're not interested, but I mean, certainly to Mike's point earlier, you know, a lot of planning has gone on for this for about 4 years.
We're about $1 million into it as far as encumbered or expensed, and because it's taken a while because we are, you know, involved with GDOT and trying to leverage their funding, so, but you can cancel at any time.
Carol?
I would suggest leaving it off consent, especially because I believe we are going to be swearing in the new commissioner for the district in which this project is.
It's true.
Okay, off consent, let's just move.
All right. Any further input before we move on? Jesse?
I just, you know, I see there is some language in the agenda item referencing the crossings on Minor Street and the plaza, but we had some discussions in the work session about potentially considering additional traffic calming measures on West Broad itself, and/or adding rapid RRFBs to the plaza and Minor Street. Does staff have an update on whether those will be built into this or not?
Not right now.
Okay.
But we can follow up.
Okay. Yeah, just having that in a follow-up report would be great. Thanks.
All right, we'll get a little bit more information about that. All right, 19, again, subject of a recent work session, and this is just the site selection criteria for Fire Station number 5. And as you remember, the desire was to effectively move this a little bit further east for better overall coverage and ideal overlap with the Fire Station number 7 that's on corner College Station Road and Barnett Shoals.
Consent?
Consent.
Manager Williams?
Well, I'll wait to the end. Well, I want to talk about Memorial Park real quick, and I know we want to move on, but from just an expense standpoint, once you approve the concept, you'll also be authorizing it to proceed to schematic design, and we'll spend additional money in design. So I would say, Commissioner Davenport, if you have fundamental issues with the concept, this would be the time to address it in the cycle.
But I do think at the work session, they said that they would be looking at those elements that Commissioner Davenport mentioned as they go through the schematic.
Yeah, the loop is being looked at, yes, that's for sure. If that's your, okay, thank you. That's all I want to say, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. All right, so 19, Fire Station on consent? Okay. Okay. All right, 20 is simply affirmation of a grant that the Sheriff's Office is applying for to the Georgia Office of Highway Safety. Input on this item? Everybody okay with this on consent? Yes. Okay. All right, 21 is judicial application for American Rescue Plan Act funds for audio-video equipment.
Consent.
All right, 21 is consent. And then 22, approval of a resolution for the new opioid settlements.
Consent.
Jesse?
I just had a question about, you know, once this moves forward and you sign the many papers I'm sure you're going to have to sign, Mr. Mayor, do we know when we expect to receive the money and what the planned use of those funds will be?
Manager Williams, can you talk a little bit more about use of those opioid settlement funds?
I do not have what the use for that is at this point, but we can look into that.
Okay. Will there be another agenda item in the future that would talk about that, or would this
Well-
kind of go into like administrative review?
And Attorney Drake, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on this opioid settlement. I know you'd put together the resolution for this.
It's just, this is to allow us to be part of another settlement that is going to be coming out of these settlements with these large companies. I can send you a memo with some details about it. But we got it from our outside counsel who's been representing us, and they told us that we need to do a resolution to join this settlement, so that's what we're doing. But I can tell you provide you more details. What type of details are you looking for?
I guess, just as these opioid settlements come in, and eventually that leads to us getting some amount of funding.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful to understand what our intended use of those funds are. In my mind, we try to apply those to something that helps counter the opioid crisis, but it's not clear to me whether it could actually just hit our general fund and go towards paying for a stormwater pipe. Not that we shouldn't be also funding stormwater pipes, but
It's only authorized for specific purposes, and I can send you information on that.
okay, maybe some
The
information
entire
on
commission.
what the specific purposes that they can be used for are, and then also like which department would administer determining, which of those things on the list to choose from.
I don't think that's all been worked out yet, actually,
But certainly before the funds were expended, that would have to come to this
That's
body.
right. That's right.
And like for example, the accountability courts or some other, body, looped into that discussion, or is it just within the purview of the manager's office, I guess is another component of this that I'm wondering about. I've had some independently elected officials reach out about this particular thing, with questions about
believe we would have
if
to-
and how it could apply to programming they have in place, so.
Well, I don't believe I have the authority to assign those funds. That would have to be done by the commission. We'd have to do a budget ordinance to receive the funds
Okay.
on the front end, and then you would have to, allocate them back out, or at least approve that.
Okay.
Allison?
I can share a little bit about the Board of Health standing ready to be a partner or to answer an RFP. Obviously, if we're getting money in and then it has to go back out in the parameters, that we'll all get that email so we can know what those parameters are. But the typical thing would be putting an RFP together for entities, partners that fit the criteria, and just like we've been doing here, assessing where it would go and its best needs. So we would definitely be looped in on how this is bigger than a NOPA, right?
Yes.
Thank
No, that's-
you, yeah, that's.
Bigger than a NOPA. We'll see it again.
Carol?
And is it, perhaps Attorney Drake could address this, is this expected to take years and years, or is this?
No, it's not. Actually, I think we've gotten our first payment.
Really?
We've gotten the first payment, I believe, just recently, so it's good to give an update.
Is there any kind of expected,
It's going to come over time, though, you're correct about that. But I
Right.
want to think we got the first payment not long ago.
Am I correct that the first tranche of funds is somewhere just north of $100,000?
Yeah, it's not like groundbreaking money, but it's good,
It's not like
good money.
$5 million,
Yeah.
right.
Because they had to be split amongst all
Right,
these
right.
jurisdictions, and there's very specific things it can be spent on, but we'll do an update.
Okay.
And the manager has no authority in this government to spend money without commission approval.
Well, that's
Not
not
that,
entirely true.
well, not up to 100 grand, but not
Well,
this money, because they've used specifics for.
Up to 15,000.
15,000,
But there
yeah.
are some thresholds, but Commissioner Myers, this is not one of them. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Sounds consent.
Everybody want to put that on consent?
Yeah.
Yes.
And again,
yes.
this is going to come back to us as a
23 is
budget
title
amendment.
only.
All right, so 22 consent also.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah, question.
I know tomorrow you had put on the calendar for the grand opening of the new Publix. Is that still on?
It is
It was on the
no
calendar.
longer tomorrow. It has moved. I apologize. It'll take me just a second to get there.
Nope, it's right on, I'm right on the edge.
It is,
I was gonna go to. It's No, that's, I think it's Jeffries.
No, is that Publix done? They just started that.
It's done, it's done. It is. That's why I thought they were grand opening.
it was originally tomorrow.
Right.
It's going to be pushed off now.
Okay.
Yes. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, got a motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Fisher. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.